The fight in the market of the top mirrorless camera just feels like it feels like a 12-round boxing match these days. Canon just put their name in the ring with their recent EOS R, and I want to talk about it right now. What's up, it's your boy the Mackie Mouse with mackeemousemedia, where we talk about gear review tips and tricks, technology, and all that fun stuff, even some of my own projects on here. So if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. So we're going to get right into it here. For a little while, Sony was dominating the mirrorless camera market, and then Nikon threw their products in the match with the Z6 and the Z7. There has been a lot of speculation about Canon's entry into this mirrorless world, into whether or not their first mirrorless product was going to be like the 5D Mark IV in mirrorless form, or maybe like the lower level consumer Rebel series. Maybe it was going to be kind of a mirrorless version of that. Well, the information got released a couple days ago, and the internet went crazy. Everybody's putting out articles on it, everybody's talking about it on the YouTube channel, so I figured, why not put my 2 cents in? So here's Mackie's 2 cents on the Canon EOS R. So first things first, let's talk about the mount and lenses. So the new EOS R has an RF mount, which is different from the existing EF mount that's been around for like 30 years. And the new RF mount is supposed to be kind of future-proofed for some more interesting glass coming down the road. Basically, the diameter is larger and it's a shorter distance to the sensor, so going forward, lens design is going to be able to be a little bit faster, a little bit more compact. So that's kind of a nice thing. In terms of lenses, Canon announced 4 lenses with the EOS R, and that's really exciting. The Nikon Z series only announced 3 of them. So the 4 lenses are the 24-105 f4, that's got image stabilization. Also the 35mm 1.8 with stabilization. That 35mm is a macro lens, and so as a launch announcement for the EOS R, having a macro in that lineup is really kind of nice. Then we also have the 28-70 f2, and lastly the 50mm 1.2. Canon has been known for having some of the best glass in the business for decades, so it's going to be really interesting to see some reviews on how these lenses perform. We're going to talk a little bit about price later on, because the price is a bit of a thing you're going to have to pay attention to. But in terms of performance, I'm really excited to see how these lenses hold up. In terms of autofocus, the Canon uses a dual pixel autofocus system, which is supposed to be really, really efficient in low light, especially for video. Canon actually put out there that you can autofocus at light levels of EV-6, which is very, very dark. They also have eye tracking. This is their second model to have eye tracking, although you have to be closer to your subject for eye tracking to work than the Sony a7 III and the a7 R III. The ISO range is pretty good. It's 100 to 40,000, but the autofocus burst is really where it gets me. The shooting speed is 8 frames a second, but when you activate autofocus, that drops to 5 frames a second, and I think I read in an article that there's a special tracking priority mode that'll drop that down to 3 frames a second. I personally shoot a lot of entertainment. I shoot shows and concerts and things like that, in addition to my portrait work. So when I'm shooting something that's live, you only have one chance to get it. I shoot burst all the time and then kind of pick my favorite frames. So shooting speeds being that low is a little bit concerning for me. The Nikon Z series is very similar to the numbers that the EOS R throws up. So compared to the Sony a7 III and the a7 R III, I'm shooting on a Sony a7 III right now. The Sony a7 III has a 24 megapixel sensor. The a7 R III has a 42 megapixel sensor. Those pictures are huge. I know my pictures at 24 megapixels come out at like 6,000 by 4,000. The 42 megapixels are even bigger. It's crazy huge, a lot of detail, excellent resolution for a photo camera. Canon chose to go kind of right in between those two with a 30 megapixel sensor. It's actually a 30.3 megapixel sensor, which is pretty smart to kind of go right down the middle there. So it is a pretty good solution for both photo and video applications. The other thing that really bothers me about the sensor that Nikon included, and obviously Sony has, that the EOS R does not have, is it doesn't have IBIS. That's in-body image stabilization. The sensor doesn't counteract any movement. So a lot of lenses have stabilization, but when you have a lens with stabilization and your body is also counteracting movement, those two come together to make a really, really great product. And when you don't have stabilization in the body, you're just relying on the lenses that do have them. And if you have a lens that doesn't have stabilization, you're completely screwed because you have nothing stabilizing your image. So not having in-body stabilization is a little bit of a negative for me, but that's just because of this kind of style that I use. Maybe if you're shooting studio work and you're on a tripod, maybe that's not as concerning for you, but I, for one, really like having stabilization in my body, so tisk on you, Canon, for not including that in there. One of the biggest things that people will notice visually on this camera is a bone of contention among Sony shooters, and that is the LCD display on the back of the body. So, of course, Canon included a flippable display on their camera, so vloggers and people who shoot selfies are going to be really happy about that, and obviously Sony does not have that in any of their lines, which is really, really disappointing, and all of us Sony shooters are always just like, Sony, just include, if you just put a flippable display, this camera would be near perfect. Why don't you do it? And every time they release one, we're like, oh! It is really cool that you get a front-facing display on this one. Nikon also included that in their line, so Sony's a little bit behind on that aspect. Hey buddy, you doing okay? Did you want to be in the video? Yeah? That's Mason, guys. He's great. Say hi, Mason. No? Okay, never mind. So this is another area where it really starts to split off away from some of those other models, and that's video resolution. So the EOS R shoots 4K at 30 frames a second, which some of these other models do, but it shoots 4K 30 at a 1.7 crop factor, which turns this 35 millimeter into basically this. It's too tight. I can't deal with that. You really, really need your full frame to be a full sensor readout. The Nikons shoot full sensor, the Sonys shoot full sensor. The Canon official statement about it is that they did that to reduce overheating in the sensor, but these other models already do it, and they do it well. So there's really no excuse for that. In terms of slow-mo, it also shoots 120 frames a second, which is great for that super silky 4 times slower slow-mo, but it shoots 120 limited to 720p. That's 1280 by 720, which is this much of the frame. That's not enough either. That's got the same crop issue, which again, they claim is an overheating problem. But the Sony shoots 120 1080 without a problem. So if other models are kind of already doing it, it seems like kind of a lame excuse to not include that in your first mirrorless line. To add insult to injury, it does shoot 1080-60, but you can only shoot 30 seconds at a time. Again, claiming an overheating problem. It's already been done. Figure it out. That's all I'm saying. Last but not least, let's talk about price, because that is one of the biggest questions that you always get about these things. Like, yeah, it's cool, but how much is it? The EOS R will be available in October, and it's going to ship body only for $2,300, and with the kit, it's going to be $3,400. That kit comes with the 24-105 f4 lens. Ahead of that, 35mm is going to be coming in September for $500. The 50 1.2 is going to be $2,300, just as expensive as that body, and that's coming in October. The 28-70 f2 is going to be $3,000, and that comes in December. The 24-105 f4 by itself, if you don't get it with the kit, is going to be $1,100, and that hits also in December. Those are some high dollar amounts for this stuff. Now, Canon glass, again, very, very superior in the glass game, but this is a lot of money for entry-level lenses. Not to mention, this body is $2,300, and the Sony a7 III and the Nikon Z series, the bodies start at $2,000, and with the kit, it only goes up to like $2,400, not $3,400. So that's a pretty big jump for having some pretty blaring issues with not shooting 120, 1080, shooting 1080 60 but only for 30 minutes at a time, shooting 4K 30 with a crop, that's insane, having autofocus and burst speeds go down to 3 frames a second or 5 frames a second, compensating for other things in the camera. There's a lot of holes with this camera for you to be charging that much extra for it. So I would say it is a great start for Canon's first step into the mirrorless pool, but I still think that the Nikon has some advantages, and my personal favorite, the Sony a7 III, knocks both of these out of the water because of the features and how much better the autofocus is and the resolution and everything. I really do think that the Sony a7 III is so far winning this bout between the companies, Sony, Nikon, and Canon. So that's my 2 cents. That's what I think about it. The EOS R is a great first step, but it's not quite there yet. The purpose of this video is definitely not to bash Canon. I'm actually really glad that they were brave enough to kind of dive into this part of the industry, because it's not easy competing with these other really big companies. And so they're really pushing the thing that they've done best for a long time, which is their lenses, but their bodies are not quite there yet. I feel like they could get there, but this is just the first step, maybe of many, but it's just the first one. I think that Sony is still killing this game, and I may be biased, but I gotta tell you, I switched from Canon. I was a 60D shooter for the longest time, and I had EF mounts, and I got rid of all my lenses. I mean, I have my bodies, I have some stuff left over, but I switched completely over to Sony when the Sony a7 III dropped. And so far, especially with releases like this, the question is always like, do you move to Canon? Do you move to Nikon? You know, if you're one of those shooters already, do you change your entire family over to Sony? And so far with these announcements, I feel like I made the right decision. For me, anyway. I am really happy with my Sony, so I'm excited to see what happens next. So I hope that gave you some insight into Canon's new EOS R mirrorless camera. So why don't you let me know in the comments below what you think about the EOS R and whether that is a game changer, whether or not Canon's lenses are going to make up for some of the, faults of the camera body, and let's have a little conversation about that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it. If you enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up, ring that bell so that you don't miss out on any of the fun. If you're interested in any of the gear that I use or some of my recommendations, I got a whole bunch of links down in the description below, so go check those out. And until next time, just go shoot, because the best is yet to come. Peace!